You're listening to Sarah Hagan Backstage, with interviews and insights from years inside the music industry. Join Sarah as she talks with masters of their crafts, finding out what makes them tick both inside and outside of the music business.
Welcome to Sarah Hagan Backstage. My guest today, Pete Lockett, is a world-renowned percussionist who has played with dozens of the world's top musicians, such as Bjork, Peter Gabriel, Robert Plant, Dido, Bill Bruford, Jeff Beck, Zakir Hussain, Nelly Furtado, Dave Weckl, Thomas Lang, Amy Winehouse, R Rahman, just to name a few. Pete arranges and records music for movie soundtracks. He has published books with more on the way. He creates instruments, and he has a percussion app. We will talk about all of these things and more, so come along with me as I catch up with Pete Lockett. Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me on, Sarah. It's an honour. You've had some amazing people, and I've been following it all closely.
Oh, thank you so much. You're such a big supporter, and I so appreciate that. And I'm just excited to get the chance to catch up with you.
Absolutely, yeah, me too.
I did see your face at PASIC in November, last November, so that was wonderful. But it was such a whirlwind of a few days that we didn't really have a chance to chat and catch up. So this is nice.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And speaking of PASIC, wonderful performance, amazing. You played with Thomas Lang, and the two of you just, of course, like superstars. So the two of you together, it was just such an amazing performance, demonstrating all of the percussion and Thomas on his drum kit, and it was just incredible.
Yeah, it was. I was really excited to that we could make that happen. I mean, that it did happen is really touch and go, because the travel ban just ended a few days before
Yes.
the event, which was like I was biting my nails on that one, just following, because they announced, it's going to open up in late October, and oh my God. And then they didn't give the date, but luckily we were right. But what we lost was the rehearsal period. So I was going to go to LA, rehearse for a week with Thomas. We were going to do some different videos and stuff like that for DW and LP, and then head on to PASIC and do the show. So luckily we did a lot of prep before anyway, in supplying each other different files and different things to that we could use as outlines. And then we had an hour's rehearsal in one of the hotel rooms, and good to go.
Right, but you guys are so professional that it was not noticeable that you didn't have that rehearsal time, and that you can pull that off with just a rehearsal in a hotel room. That's amazing, and it was touch and go for sure with that travel ban. I know we had artists coming over for PASIC, from a few different countries in Europe, and it was like fingers crossed right up to the very last minute. So I'm so happy.
Yeah.
That worked out. And wasn't it amazing though, just to be back with our community, our industry family, and even in such a weird time, it just felt like a tiny bit of normalcy for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a real, I kind of think of it like almost like a stepping stone. We're swimming again now, but it's kind of like a stepping stone, and you catch up with everyone. And then you realize, I mean, for me, you might have noticed I've not done that much, performance or video content, playing video content, live streams and stuff like that. And that's primarily because it's that experience that's what music means to me, is playing, in front of people live, with that whole, relationship with the audience and the performer. And it's vitally important to me.
Yeah. And, Pete, you send out these newsletter updates, which are so fantastic. Just kind of like letting us all know what you've been up to over the past year. And I remember getting these newsletter updates from you in the past, and, you travel extensively, and, it was like, well, Pete's been in Austria, and he's been in Japan, and it's like the updates are so extensive and amazing. I just think like reading through this, wow, what a year. And so you just sent out a newsletter update, and I have to say I was so incredibly impressed. Although pandemic times, things are different, travel is tough, and like you just mentioned, the live music and the playing opportunities are so different. Your newsletter was still incredible, and you've done like everything that you can do in a time where things are so different. So kudos to you for that, for sure.
Thank you. I think it's important to and it's like, it's a basic thing really, is take control of what you can take control of, and the rest of it you've got to leave to chance really. There's but for me, the pandemic came in, and I thought, what can I take control of? There were certain things at that time on the back burner, like books that were really time consuming to write, like the Kanjira book was literally thousands of audio examples had to be recorded for it, and then the Independence book is just, it's probably tens of thousands of examples in it. So it was a good opportunity in a sense to look at those things, and I can take control of that. Obviously it's disappointing and miserable that the other stuff isn't happening, but at least take control of what I could take control of and see where we are.
Right. And you just mentioned those books. You did release 2 books, and you have a third one that you're working on, and I love that you kind of teased it, where it's it's coming out later this year, right? With also a celebrity percussionist contributor, right?
you know him very well. He's been on the podcast.
Okay, and I have an idea of who that might be, but I will not say any names because we'll be surprised when it comes out. That's so exciting, though. I'm very happy for you. With that, and these books join your books that you've released that are so educational and creative. You release these books that are really like different than the other things that are out there, which I always love because, learning new things and understanding new instruments and all of that is fascinating. But yeah, so I'm excited to see what that is when it comes.
Yeah. It's exciting, and again, it's another really big project to put together. But what I like is when I can put things together. Like the thing with Thomas, or the stuff that I did with Russ Miller and different drummers, is to put things together and kind of build bridges between different styles and different people who have sometimes got completely different approaches to music, or in different genres, should we say, rather than different approaches, and to see what have we got in common. That's where can we build bridges with the things that we do. And for me, that's a vitally important strand of all my collaborations and musical outreaches. I don't know what to call them really. Collaborative outreach work.
I like that though. Yeah, musical outreach. I like that. And I think one of the things that you have that's so unique is this multicultural aspect to your playing, where you're an expert at tabla and different forms of drumming that come from different countries, and that is fascinating to me. And I want to delve into that a little bit deeper because one of the things, you can Google Pete Lockett, you can look at your website, you can find out what you're up to. You're always up to a ton of things, like I mentioned before. But one thing that I don't know about, and I don't know if people know about you, is how you came to be this expert on different styles of music from different countries. How in the world, did you end up just getting interested in it and diving in head first? Like, take us back a little bit to like your start.
It's that really. It's I always describe it as an accident in many ways, because I mean, even drumming itself was an accident. Oh, you know, I was walking past a drum shop. I was 19, walking past a drum shop in Portsmouth, which was my hometown at the time where I was from, and there was an advert in the window for drum lessons at £5. And so, you know, my family had zero interest in music at all. You know, I mean, my sisters were listening to Barry White. That was as close as I got to any music at all. Marvelous as Barry White is, not quite my cup of tea. Did you hear, actually, just as an aside, in the middle of that story, did you hear that, and this is no disrespect to Barry Manilow, but I read on the news the other day that the New Zealand police were playing Barry Manilow songs on a massive PA to disperse protesters from the parliament.
Oh no!
It worked. They all went. Anyway, we love Barry.
That's hysterical. That's hysterical.
Yeah. So my family had no interest in music. So I was just walking past a drum shop and saw the advert and thought, oh, you know, why not? And I went in, and you know, it's like all of those things. You know, later on in life as a teacher, I realised the importance of, you know, how you are as a person with people. It's not like you go into someone and, oh, I'm the expert, I'm going to show you how it's done, and all that. You know, it's really important that you've got to relate as a person. And so this guy, John Hammond, his name was, not the keyboard player, is a great local drummer, and he was so open and so logical with what he showed me. And it just immediately clicked, and I thought, wow, this is just something. The first thing that had really made sense to me, that kind of, I don't know, got to my a priori self, or my center, my spirituality. It's the first thing that got there, really, and I was like, wow. And so that was the whole direction for my life. And then I moved to London about a year later. I was in a punk band locally and stuff like that, you know, getting all that happening. Then I moved to London.
I love that. I had no idea.
Yeah, smashing my drums up after the gig and all sorts. I ended up in hospital once because I split my finger, side of my finger open on a cymbal. I mean, it looked really,
Oh my
punk.
goodness!
You know, it was the last.
That is very punk, Pete.
Yeah,
very punk.
It's the tattoos, you know.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah, then I moved to London and was, you know, starting to just work in the rock scene and different things. And then I came across a free concert, and it was the late great Ali Akbar Khan, who plays an instrument called the sarod, and the great Zakir Hussain, one of the, you know, current gods of tabla. And it was just mind blowing. You know, if you've never seen that music before live, it's literally overwhelming, completely overwhelming. So I made a mental note of it, and I thought, wow, that's you know, really interesting. But it's like if you go and you look at the you know, if you look at the rocket being launched to outer space, you don't sort of think, oh, I wonder if I can get a gig as an astronaut. But anyway, a couple of months later, or a month later or so, a newspaper came through the front door, free newspaper, and had fallen open on the mat, and there was a big advert for tabla lessons, and that was it. That was the doorway.
That's amazing. How like serendipitous that you saw Zakir and then like saw an advertisement for tabla lessons. Like,
yeah,
that's incredible. So you got into, you took the lessons, got into the music, which I love that you just mentioned that it's kind of overwhelming, and there's something about the sound that comes from the tabla that is encompassing, like it surrounds you. There's just something really beautiful and, like you mentioned, spiritual about that instrument.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just kind of like connects with you, with your soul, if you're into that style of music or that sound. And it's just beautiful. And so did you find opportunities to play tabla with?
Well, the thing about that is it's a really hard study. So initially it was just to complement my drum set playing, but because everything is so different about it, you know, primarily you're always playing the bass tabla with your left hand and the small tabla with your right hand. The way that the rhythmic structures are put together, the way that, you know, your technical application of things, the way that works within the music is completely different to how it would work, you know, in non-Indian music. Like everything was completely different. So I couldn't really see that many ways to apply it. But it's another strange thing. But next door to me, where I used to live in Tottenham at this point, there was a guy who had just been let out of the mental hospital.
Okay.
And so when I played drum set in that place, basically I was risking my life, because
What?
he would come out and he would, you know, throw stones at the window and
Oh
just
my goodness.
so but he couldn't hear the tabla. And so
Wow.
I could practice the tabla, and that was, so that's one of the reasons. I mean, again, it's bizarre, you know, but one of the reasons that I focused a lot on it. And also, like with the, you know, as with the drum set, it made total sense to me, you know, logically, the ergonomics of it, the way the hands move. It's such an amazingly logical system. And if you think it goes back to 300 BC, where there's the first, you know, examples of recitation of syllables and the clapping of a time cycle. So the system itself has been developed over such a huge amount of time that it's, you know, I mean, it's literally a gold mine of rhythmic, you know, linear rhythmic perfection. Yeah, it's just, you know, standing.
It's amazing. And then years later, you know, you end up playing with Zakir and everything comes full circle and you are the astronaut being, you know, shot up into outer space
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
That's just incredible. And so did you like travel to India and spend some time?
No, all of my studies were in London, and then I got into the South Indian thing. And basically, what I did was I had a 6-year period where, you know, I didn't work. I just ate very simply, almost like a monk or something, and I just had 4 4-hour lessons a week with my South Indian teacher, and
Wow.
just practiced the whole time. So that was, you know, that was my kind of university, if you like, you know, rhythmic university, the bodybuilding phase.
Right. It is amazing. And it's just you know, you have brought that back to the drum set as well, which I think is fascinating. You know,
Yeah,
your book Indian Rhythms for the Drum Set. I feel like it's amazing that connection that's been made and it's you know, those types of books help people expand their creative thinking on an instrument that's been kind of traditional over time. So
yeah, yeah.
that's a really nice thing. I think that's, you know, it's just a wonderful contribution that you've given to the industry as well. So,
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's
yeah.
important. A little bit like with the collaborations, you know, it's important for me to try and first of all open doors to some of the concepts that I know a little bit about, but then to also build bridges technically to say this is how you can, you know, this is how you can use it. This is, I mean, if you strip away, you know, the syllables and the sounds of the drums, and you orchestrate a lot of the, you know, Indian ideas on drum set or percussion or whatever, it just sounds like contemporary, you know, advanced contemporary rhythm work. Some of the stuff that you hear Matt Gasker playing, for example, in, you know, particularly in you know, the Animals as Leaders things. I mean, it's super Indian. You know, you could do Indian versions of a lot of that material. The way that they're using the rhythmic, you know, options.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is fascinating to me too how that's developed over time. You know, we look back at drum set drumming and the traditional drum set drumming and like how where it's come encompassing all of this all of the new the you know not new but all of the rhythms that have come from other places, the creativity, the inspiration that's kind of come into it. um
Yeah.
that's
You know what I would love to have seen is if the drum set had come like 100 years earlier, and so that early phase of the instrument would have built up because everything changes so fast. You know, if you
Yes.
look at, like, and it's not wrong or right, it's amazing that things are changing and there's many myriad of different styles all the time, you know, popping up. But one of the things when you look at, you know, some traditional cultures of music is that they had a solid growth period, like time in the womb, should we call it, before they've gone out and then different things are happening to it. It'd just be interesting. I mean, obviously, we'll never know, but it'd be an interesting. Maybe there's a film in it,
Right. Well,
we'll both watch it,
right? Well, and speaking of films too, I have to mention your work on movie soundtracks, because that's one thing that's always in your newsletters is like what new movies you've worked on. And one of my favorite movies as far as soundtracks go is always the 007 movies, because the music is so good. It's like, that the theme song's going to be fantastic, and it's going to have like an amazing musician on it, amazing singer, amazing. It's just always on point. And you've done 5 of those, right?
I did 5. Yeah. I was very, very, lucky and honored. I mean, there's not many things you do like that are, I suppose, go back to your childhood and you think, oh, I'm playing on an 007 film. It was amazing and very lucky, and I had a great relationship with. They were all the films that David Arnold did, and in the past I'd had a duo with David Arnold. We did the South Bank Centre, did a gig at the South Bank Centre together many years ago. And so it was great to work with him because, it was I could just go in and do my thing as a soloist on it and, build it all up. In fact, by the end, what I was doing was before we'd even started on the film, I'd record a load of percussion for him, just basic, like 2-minute percussion tracks, maybe 10 or 20, something like that. And then multi-track, and then send them to him. And then he would use that to write to, and then I'd go in and replace it or add to it or do different stuff. So it's really interesting, and I'm proud to have done that. It's something that I definitely enjoyed and was glad to have done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially with movie soundtracks, and I've mentioned this before on this podcast, but it really like makes or breaks the movie. Whatever's happening, like if the soundtrack is killer, it just enhances everything about it, everything about the film, everything about the experience. And I just interviewed Antonio Sanchez recently. We talked a bit about the Birdman soundtrack and how cool it was that the whole thing was him. I would love to see more films like that. That would be super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, on that theme, my wife can't watch a film if there's a certain threshold that the soundtrack can't go. She's a pianist. There's a certain threshold the soundtrack can't go beyond, and then she's like, I can't watch it. Sometimes when it's a good soundtrack, I'm kind of, following the story, and then I know that she hasn't. So I say, oh, you really, have you followed what's happened? She said, oh, no, it was a minor seventh going to I said, I missed it all. What happened? So we have to pause the film and I tell her what happened, and then we move on.
Right.
Own life.
No, that's amazing though. That's exactly what I mean, right? So if you're so into sound that it matters, it can change things for you. It can change your perspective on things, I think. And in a musical setting, in a movie setting, whatever you happen to be doing. I find it funny sometimes when I am out and about walking, I've thought of this often walking through airports, but the music is on in the background. And as a drummer, you want to walk in time with whatever is happening. And it cracks me up sometimes to think about like, you're just like walking in time with the music and other people looking at you like, what is that person doing? But you can't help it because you have to like, it doesn't feel right if you're not. So that's interesting though about your wife really like not into the actual movie because the music is overtaking her, right? How interesting. But and like speaking of sound too, you are like the master of sounds and sound effects and different percussion instruments. And you and I had a really great conversation recently about this over email, just how interesting it is to explore new sound options.
Yeah.
I am obsessed with that, and I I love seeing new things, new options, new instruments popping up, and it seems like that's happening
Yeah.
often.
I think one of the things is where you draw the line with I mean, I don't draw the line with sound in terms of sound defined by instruments. I don't really see that there's a line there. I mean, I see sound, as everything, as everything that makes a noise is potentially a music making device, or everything that has some sort of rhythmic flow, a waterfall, the rhythm of waterfall, even someone drilling the road, or I mean maybe not right next to it, but safe distance. It's all really, there's a lot of interesting things. And I've always liked, particularly in, not so much in the stuff that I've done on drum festivals and things like that, but the solo stuff. But I've always been really into sound, and I've always made a lot. And I've got a few here to show you if
Please do, yes.
So this is very now these are being made. I mean, these are 30 years old, I would say now.
Wow.
And it's very roughly made, but it's just bottle tops. It's all wine, bottles of wine. So it's very rhythmic like that. You can play on it, and they've all got different sounds. And of course, as a sound of it. So that's metallic wine bottle top. So that was the best one to make. To be perfectly
it's so
honest.
great. Yeah, right. You enjoyed the process.
And here's the same one with milk that made me a little bit ill, to be honest. But and again, it's really dry. It's really dry, and it's all. Well, sometimes then again, there's some people in Brazil that are making these type of things. We tend to dismiss the object. Oh, it's a milk bottle top. What value does it have? But and that to me, this is better than a lot of the stuff that you can buy off of the shelf. Because
right.
especially some of the fiberglass things and stuff like that, they're very, very. They're just too much in your face. They're too. But
too hard.
This is really subtle, and a more traditional version of that is, of course, the Kluak shells, which is one of my very watery and
yes,
just a great time. The other thing that I do is I put hooks on them. I don't know if you can see that, so you can hook them on so you can easily take them off, rather than them being, stuck on a stand the whole day. So that's something with, and another similar thing is this, which is bells from Sri Lanka. Now, the interesting thing with this is, and conceptually with the two different types of approach, is that these are all hung, so they don't resonate. So it's a very dry sound, and it stopped immediately, which is really useful in a studio setting. But another option that I use, so all the bells resonate, is this type of thing, which is like a timbali stick.
Yeah.
Then they all kind of resonate, and then you can get like staccato individual, maybe a little bit Christmassy. But then there's another one. This is one of my favorite ones.
Oh yes,
because they're well tuned.
That's beautiful.
Now the two of them together, great. I mean, I've sometimes used this as an intro. So yeah, all this sort of stuff I'm really, really into. This is another thing that I use with hung bells. This is the bottom of an Italian bottle of wine. The ones with all the string round.
Yes.
The rope round, and then you can just do instant little things like that.
So nice.
Stop it. Play it like
beautiful.
That. It's just great. I just love experimenting with all these. This is a friend of mine, Lee Mullen, got me these. They're Christmas decorations.
Oh, I love that. I love that. For anyone who's listening right now, they are like Christmas decoration stars. What are they? Are they wooden? Pete?
No, I think they're quite hard. I think they may
Okay.
be a very hard papier-mâché or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe a clay. But just really great. Just all these sounds. And I got this idea from Terry Bozzio, is that in Japan they do these little key rings. I mean, everyone puts them on their bag, and so you can hear people walking around. But I mean, this is a small one, but I've got one of about 50, and it's just so loud.
Wow. They're
Really
like little
piercing.
little jingle bells, right?
Yeah, but even like one of them. Well, they're all making a racket now. It's just
Sounds
great.
so nice.
Great things, you know. Just so yeah, I'm always into sounds, and then you know, processing them a lot as well. You know, putting them through electronics and you know.
Yeah, that's exactly, and that's one thing that I admire about you, because you have these traditional instruments and these acoustic instruments, but you also utilize electronics to, like you said, process them, create different sounds. You actually have an app, which I love, the Drum Jam app, right? So you can,
Great.
in that app, you can layer percussive instruments over each other to create music, and it's really super cool.
No, I'm glad you like
So
it. Yeah, it's something that I'm really proud of, actually. I mean, it's got multiple uses. On the one side of the coin, you know, it's a music production app, so you can export everything as WAV files and upload it to SoundCloud or email it, or you know, file share and stuff like that.
mhm.
But then on the other side of the coin, it's a plaything. So you know,
Yes.
there's one part of it is the loops, as you know, and then the other part is the solo pads. And so just by dragging your finger
Mhm.
across the across the surface, you can trigger the sounds, and you set the how they're triggered and all that. And it's funny because I got quite a few emails from relatives of people in hospital, and that have like been injured, or in different medical situations, and they're saying, oh, my husband or my wife, was they can't really move, but they can do that, and they're really
Mhm.
enjoying it. And it's like, oh, I'd never thought of that as an application.
Wow.
It's really really good. And then of course educationally, sometimes people will not know what an instrument is. So I don't know, like the pakawaj or kanjira or
Yes.
tabla, or whatever. And so I wanted the idea to make it completely accessible, so someone can explore the tones of the instrument, just to understand what the tones of the instrument are. So that was another application that I wanted to put together. It's in partnership with a great app designer called Jesse Chappell, who was one of the first music app.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's the thing about it too. I mean, like you just brought up a bunch of other really cool applications for it. I thought, it's fun. Like you said, it's kind of a play thing where you can like play around and you can make sounds and things, but then being able to actually take those files and use them in
Yeah,
music, like it's really like professionally applicable, which I
yeah,
think is really fantastic. And then yeah, I found myself being educated because there are a bunch of instruments on there that I've never seen before, and
yeah.
how cool is that?
That's great. That's really good.
Right?
Yeah,
And speaking of instruments that I've never seen before, I just cannot go without mentioning the instruments that you've created with the companies that you're involved with, and one being Vic Firth with the remix
yeah,
brushes. And I was at Vic Firth at the time when those were being developed, and I remember going up to the factory in Maine, the Vic Firth factory, and it was early stages. So Neil Larrivee had all of these bits and pieces and parts and things, and was experimenting, and you two were, very closely working on different applications. So he
yeah,
had what fascinated me was, being really someone who loves the creative process and also loves sound, to see things from that really initial perspective. He had a broom. He had taken the bristles out of the broom, and he had like like a big thing of grass, and it was just it was super cool. For anyone who hasn't seen the remix brushes, they are organic material brushes that you can stack together. They're flat. You can stack them together and play them together and mix and match. And yeah, like really cool materials. And I remember he had a heat gun and he was working with the, and
Yeah.
I was just like, to me, that's like fun. That's like playtime. Like, let's
Absolutely.
experiment, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think we kind of lost that a little bit, with where we are as an, kind of industrial production species now, aren't we? Really, to get in and play like children with developing projects and having the child's mind, I think is so vitally important. Of saying, why can't
Yes.
these two things fit together? Why can't this work? And
Yes.
experiment.
Absolutely, Pete. And I think one thing that's so important to ask ourselves is what if? Like, and I found myself saying that so often in my time at Zildjian and Vic Firth, and now working with Russ Miller with GrooveX Percussion and creating new products and sounds and
Yeah,
accessories and things. Like, I say that all the time. Well, what if we did this? What if this happened?
yeah,
Like, what would happen if we tried? And that leads to so many different options, and what comes out of it is really fun and
yeah,
and different sometimes. What if we put round holes in cymbals instead of slotted holes? What if we did, what if we tried a different uh you know patina on something? What if we left that bell raw on the cymbal instead of lathing it? What happens? Like that
yeah.
kind of thing. And you do that a lot. And those remix brushes are super cool and totally unique.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really happy that happy that they came out, but because obviously it's something that I've been using, homemade versions for, 25 years or more. But just because it
Mhm.
was great particularly for recording, because you can just flip it over and you can have a completely different sound, or you can have the soft sound on one side reinforced by the harder thing on the back side of it, and so it's really, really cool, thing. But I think it's the mind of the percussionist as well, to mess around and make things. And if you think of you know art as a behavior, or the development of music as a behavior that goes back to the very beginning of our species,
Mhm.
it began with people making things and
Yes.
experimenting, realizing that something makes a sound in the first place. And you look at all of the different things that have been developed across the world, depending on what the climate is, or what the materials in that particular area are, and stuff like that. So I think it's kind of I don't know, a positive primitive approach. What I would say.
Right, exactly. And sometimes all it takes is a company to say, "Let's try that and see what happens. Let's see if we can,
Yeah,
mass manufacture that primitive idea or sound."
yeah,
Which is, why again I love working with Russ and at GrooveX and getting a chance to work with you all on
yeah,
these concepts, because that's where things come from. That's where ideas come from, is out in the field, right? Like in practical
absolutely.
application, and then being able to offer that option of sound to the masses, I think it's just so important. And I love to see things like, the first time I saw a drummer taping coins to their cymbal
Yeah,
for like a riveted sound that can be taken on and off and changed up. I was
yeah,
just like, that is super cool. Like,
yeah,
just anything like that. How primitive is that, right? Tape and a
yeah.
coin. But
I mean,
it
you know,
works.
sometimes it's a simple idea, and people have dismissed it because, oh, it's simple. It can't possibly work. But I think it takes bravery as well, to start coming out with. I'm not saying I'm brave. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying to actually be experiment. To experiment, and to be
Mhm.
able to come up with different sounds out of things that people might dismiss in an everyday setting. I think is
Yeah,
there's a bit of degree of
absolutely.
bravery in that.
I agree. I agree. And in everyday settings, like you're finding those the wine caps and the milk bottle caps and
Yeah,
the jingle bells and Christmas ornaments and these things that
yeah,
make super cool sounds. And I'm wondering if you find or if you gain creative inspiration from other things too, like when you see art or
yeah,
when you experience things outside of the music realm, does that
yeah.
bring up thoughts and ideas as well?
Yeah, I suppose the the biggest experience I had with that was a few years ago. I wrote a novel, and in my mind, I never thought that I could, get to where I feel spiritually, musically, in anything other than music. Um, but I really, really did get there writing the novel. It was a science fiction novel, a survivor's guide to eternity. Kind of works for COVID, doesn't it? Really, it's like,
Yes. Yeah.
lasted for so long. But yeah, and it really, I mean, you kind of fall into it, and you just, and I think that's part of the thing, and I think that's one of the things about. I mean, I don't meditate as such, but I
Hmm.
meditate through music. So I meditate by playing, something very simple for a specific amount of time. So even,
Hmm.
triplets at 70 BPM for 30 minutes without stopping, turn the phone off and just do that. And you find that you fall into it, or you kind of go inside it and you're looking outwards. I
Right.
don't know, no words for it really. So I'm just, making up some sort of, believable narrative, but, but you kind of fall into it, a bit like when you repeat a word over and over again and
Hmm.
it ceases to mean anything, which I guess
Hmm.
is, part of a Buddhist thing, chanting in that way. But to do it, with music, and I find that you get to a really good point in your mind where you've thrown everything away that's, bothering you, and or at least temporarily, and you kind of, you're in the space, shall we say?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, you kind of get inside of your own head,
Yeah,
which is, I think, something that we probably don't do enough of.
yeah,
In everyday life, there's so much external, so much to do, so much going on,
yeah,
that to take that time to just get inside and
yeah.
you let your brain do what it wants to do, right? Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
there's not enough time.
It's overwhelming, really. I think the things that, I mean, I think we take for granted, all of the things that we have available to us at the moment, and take for granted that we have to do them.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I remember, obviously before social media and before, I mean, I can remember having to phone people up, get the Musicians Union phone book, and I'd get an address and send them a cassette, or if I used to
Mhm.
cold call a lot of people, it didn't always work. I remember cold calling one guy, in a jazz player. I can't remember who it was, but what I would do is as soon as they answered the phone, that was it. I'd go. They couldn't get a word in edgeways. My whole thesis would be presented to them, expecting that they would be interested. Of course, they wouldn't be. Anyway, I did this one guy. This one guy. He had to interrupt me, and he said, "Man, it's the middle of the night here." I was like, "Oh, I haven't got the gig then." It's funny.
That's too funny. Yes, the
So
time differences.
yeah, so we come through to that now. We got, and then first of all, you got the internet, and that's like, wow, that's amazing. We can see all these things, and then I suppose the first thing was MySpace, where you could get
Right.
great connectivity with lots of musicians, and then suddenly we're in this place now with all these different social media platforms, and also, I suppose, in a way, although there's massive positivity in some of the things that I see on Instagram and Facebook are amazing. The plays that I would never have seen, ideas that I would never have seen. But I think the way that we deal with it is super important, because I think there's a sensibility and an attentiveness that are kind of endangered, I would say, because the sensibility, in the sense that I think to be a great musician, you have to be a little bit vulnerable. You can't just be, super macho or super sort of overconfident and play your way through everything, because I don't think that would lead to a great sensitive, performance. So I think to be a good artist, a good musician, necessitates a degree of vulnerability. And so then we've immediately got a conflict, because then you're in an environment with social media where that vulnerability can be, prodded all the time with what people are saying in a completely unnatural way. We're not used to receiving information like that, judgments or,
Right.
things like that. And the other thing that I would say about it is attentiveness is not so much, musicians of my age, because we've grown up with, longer pieces of music, basically. But this idea of attention span, I think a lot of people now, and I'm as guilty of it as everyone else, is you look at something, it's got its 30-second, 40-second window, which is perfect for marketing. Obviously, a perfect marketing tool. But people become impatient with music. So I think there are two things that philosophically need to be considered in how we musicians embrace social media and interact with it within our lives, because otherwise there can be, and I've seen many people who are like, oh, I'm off of social media, I can't do it, I can't deal with it anymore. And it's become such a vital component for our, to promote our careers, if you like, or promote our messages or what we're doing. So I think it's a lot more complex than, I don't go along with everyone saying everything's totally positive about what we've got at the moment on our hands, because I think there are a lot of other things to consider with it as well.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. And I think one of the things that comes up in these conversations often is the concept of, is social media stifling the creativity of musicians and the individuality, and as you mentioned, the vulnerability, because it's really, really hard to make music that you want to make without considering what the masses are going to think about it, right? Or content in general, this podcast this is really for maybe a smallish group of people who want to hear an hour-long conversation about, in depth into like the drumming world and community and sound and the lives behind the music, really. But that's great, because that's who it's for, and it doesn't need to be for everybody. But and that's kind of how I see music. Like, if you're making music because it's what's inside of you, the people who get it will get it, and that's perfect. So that's one piece of advice that kind of keeps coming up from guests on the podcast is, make the music that is inside of you. That's, what is you, like, put it out there. Those who get it will get it. And the ones who don't, like, just, you have to kind of develop a thick skin against that and let it roll off.
True to yourself, I mean, I always, philosophically, you always think, with, even performing live, you think, well, there's going to be X amount of percentage of people that really like this, a percentage that understand it and maybe, kind of like it a bit, a percentage that don't understand it or indifferent, and then a percentage that will absolutely hate everything about it. And that's just the logical way to think about it, because no one likes, who likes everything,
Absolutely. Yeah, everything is a curve, right? There's always a curve to everything. And and I think once we come to terms with that and reconcile that fact, then we can all be more creative and more open and vulnerable. And I do think that
be true to yourself, really. That's really and give an honest portrayal of what you do without seeking approval. I think that's a vital caveat to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, I agree. And just I do want to mention too, you talked about your book a little bit. I just want to remind anyone listening, it's A Survivor's Guide to Eternity. And I read the first bit of the book, and I just have to tell you, it's your use of description is amazing. And
Yeah, thank you.
your alliteration, I'm thinking like, wow, Pete, like I didn't know. I had no idea. And I am headed on a brief vacation next week, just going to be like reading a lot and trying
Great.
to relax. So I'm going to finish your book then, but I've loved it. The start of
Oh,
it is
great.
is
That's
really
lovely
great.
to hear.
Yeah, really interesting and so different and again something that was inside of you and you had the opportunity to present it out there to the world, and
Yeah.
so
Again,
great.
it was a weird thing because I woke up one morning and I just had the first page. God knows why you'd wake up and have that first page in your head, but I did. And I didn't have a
And
hang up either.
right.
And then once I'd started, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but once I started, I couldn't stop. Now I can't start the second one. That's a weird thing.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I feel like when it's ready though, it will come out,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When you're able to get inside your own head for long enough, it'll
Yeah.
it'll come out for sure.
Maybe in the middle of those 70 BPM triplets.
Right. Exactly. Um, so you let us know you have another book coming out that is not able to be talked about yet, and we'll find out about it. But tell us what else is up, what else you'll be up to in 2022. What's coming?
Well, I mean, to be honest, generally speaking, I'm keeping the year pretty quiet because, I mean, PASIC was an exception because
Mhm.
I had to go out and do that. It's not, it's such a great project and great event to perform at. I mean, I'm vaccinated and I'm fine to travel, but I still don't feel brilliantly comfortable about the hassles of it all. And
Mhm.
so I mean, also, as I said to you earlier, I'm moving home as well. So I'm kind of focused on that really. That
Yes.
said, there's still a lot of, a lot of projects going on. There's a new version of the app coming out, which is an audio unit, which is slightly different. It's a standalone and an audio unit. So an audio unit is what will work within, Cubase or Cubasis or whatever the different apps are within the operating system, the iOS.
Mhm.
So they've got that. They've got a contact plugin, a percussion contact plugin, which will work more in terms of within Logic or within Ableton and stuff like that. But it's not a percussion plugin that is. It's with a company called Rattly Raw, and they do some really cool, adventurous plugins. So this one is it's using percussion sounds, but with an idea that not like, oh, you're going to have a conga part and a cowbell and a bass drum or whatever. It's using percussion sounds as the sources for sound design. So there's loads and loads of effects and manipulators and arpeggiators and stuff like that. So you can make really, really weird, percusso electric. Is that a new category there?
I like that.
Stuff. So that's one of the things that I'm focusing on as well.
That's awesome. And I'll put some links too so that everyone can check out all of those things and find
Right.
you and find the app and all that. I'll link that as well. I don't want to forget to mention the live stream that you did that was so incredible, and I watched it when you did it. I watched the live stream when you did it, and I just
Oh,
recently watched
great.
it again. So tell us a little bit about that, and I'll link that as well.
Yeah, that's the with a keyboard player, Peter John Vitesi, who's like an amazing virtuosic, open-minded keyboard player. I mean, he's got a big track history of working with different bands, and he wrote a lot of stuff for the Eurythmics and different. He's got quite a big track record in the industry as a producer. So he's a great guy to work with, and it's very filmic and improvisatory, and not really. It's not so much about technique and virtuosity, and it's really about soundscapes, and of course there's going to be bits of the odd 30-second note here and there, but really it's kind of texture and mood and all of those elements of which in my solo work I focus more on the virtuosic performance element of it, which is fine. It is what it is, but this is a different side to what I do, So it's a really great project put together by a guy called Paul Cameron, who's a great, positive person putting projects together.
Absolutely, and it's a really great example of your use of sound options too, so people can see that on there,
and a lot of electronics, looping, and,
yes,
different live looping and all that stuff, which is again is some maybe I might even completely redesign what I do live in terms of even drum clinics, make it more chilled and more less and more.
I like that. I like that so much. And speaking of looping too, like it's so fascinating to me to watch you do that. And there are a lot of musicians right now that are exploring looping that haven't before, and it's super cool to watch that in a percussion setting as well. I love that. Love it.
Well, there's a lot you can do. I mean, with technology and effects pedals, and there's so much stuff that you can do with it all. It's mind blowing,
Yeah, it is amazing to me how far things have come in the creative direction in such a short amount of time, and like technology in general. It's just like there's a whole world out there. To explore when it comes to sound, and musicians like you are showing what's possible and encouraging that exploration, and I just love that.
It's great. Great. It's good to explore it, to be honest. I'm glad you noticed that.
Absolutely, and I look forward to following along with the things that you are going to do this year, finding out about that new book and who the mystery collaborator is, and
it's
and
Madonna.
Right, Madonna. Oh, that would be great.
Indian Rhythms by Madonna.
I love that. And then also I can't wait for your next newsletter, because I'm sure it's going to be filled with like the most incredible things that you've done, and it always just, it's always just amazing to me. But yeah, and I also look forward to seeing you again in person sooner than later, when traveling is much easier of a of a concept in general. And hopefully things do take a turn for the better in that aspect soon. It seems like that's where things are heading. So
hopefully, I think fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers crossed. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Pete, for coming on and sharing with us and telling us some things about yourself that I didn't know, and that I think will inspire everybody else. So I appreciate that.
Thanks for having me on, Sarah. It's been a great pleasure.
Absolutely. I'll see you soon.
Ciao, ciao.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for tuning in today. Join us each Tuesday for new episodes of Sarah Hagan Backstage.